In this video, we're going to look at formatting and loading stills onto your memory palace. First, let's take a look at how stills are saved and organized on your LZX memory palace. Turn our memory palace on, navigate where it says Enable USB Access. So we'll jump down, plug our USB cable in, push the button. So now we should be seeing our memory palace drive appearing on the desktop of our computer. Inside there will be a folder for stills. Opening this up, you'll see separate folders for NTSC and PAL. Your memory palace will load one of these two folders depending on which sync standard you are using for the system. If you're only operating in either NTSC or PAL, you only need to worry about one of these folders. However, the memory palace ships with default stills in both formats. The readme.txt file contains all the info you need to make and organize your own stills. We'll go over all this information in this video, but this is a great little refresher cheat sheet in case you need to remember the exact resolutions or locations of where you put your files. Opening up one of these folders, we can see the basic format for how stills are organized in the memory palace. Each of these folders can contain up to 32 images. It's good to name these in a descriptive way so that you'll know when you're flipping through your sets what you want to access. Inside each folder, you'll see the stills themselves. For NTSC, these images are set to a default size of 720 by 480 pixels. It's pretty important to make sure you match this exactly. For PAL stills, you'll want to make sure they're 720 by 576 pixels. The images that you load can be either PNG, JPEG, BMP, or GIF format. We recommend mostly sticking to JPEG and PNG as they're easier to work with. The biggest difference between JPEG and PNG files is that PNG files can carry an alpha channel, which we'll get into later. Each file needs to have a corresponding thumbnail, which is stored in the thumb folder. Inside here, you'll notice that every image has the exact same name as the image in the parent folder. If the names don't match exactly, the thumbnails will not load. The thumbnails also have a very specific image size. They need to be formatted at exactly 128 by 96 pixels. Now let's look at how to simply load images from your hard drive onto the memory palace. The memory palace should show up as a USB drive, and inside you'll see folders for JSON, stills, and a boot file. So go inside to stills, and then open up the folder for whichever video standard you're using, whether it's NTSC or PAL. Inside there you'll see these folders. So then what you want to do is navigate to wherever you have your stills. In this case, I have them right here. Double check the folder to make sure there is a thumb folder inside and that all your images are named correctly. And then all you have to do is drag that folder into your stills NTSC or stills PAL file path. And from there, all you have to do is eject the USB drive that is representing the memory palace. Simply push Disable USB Access and unplug your USB cable. So let's look at how we can create our own stills for the memory palace in Photoshop. In this case, I'm using Photoshop simply because it's the image processing application I'm most familiar with. The formatting and processing we're going to talk about is super simple, and you can do this in basically any image editing application. First, I'm going to make a new file, and I'm going to set it to our exact pixel specifications for the memory palace. In this case, I'm working in NTSC, so I'm going to set it to 720 by 480. If you're in PAL, you'll set it to 720 by 576. Resolution in this case doesn't matter. Color mode, we want to make sure is set to RGB. So we'll hit create. If we want, we could just start drawing in here. We can use different text tools if we want to apply some text. We can do one of my favorite tricks, which is to use the gradient tools. And quickly create a number of different gradient shapes. And of course, if you want to use images you've downloaded from the internet or taken with your own camera, etc., the easiest way is to simply open them up into a new window. Let me find some good ones here. Selecting it, and then copying and pasting it into a properly formatted empty file. So from here I can adjust the size and positioning, color, scaling. But I know I'm not going to be squashing or stretching the image, and I know I'm also not going to end up accidentally with an image that the memory palace cannot read. So once you have your image ready, it's time to save it. So you don't want to save it as a PSD file. You want to save it as either a JPEG or as a PNG. You can also read BMP or GIF files, but these aren't going to necessarily be as efficient as JPEG and PNGs. The choice for which to use is pretty simple. If you don't have any alpha channel information, you're going to go with a JPEG. If you do have alpha channel information, you're going to go with a PNG. You can also just go with PNGs for everything. That's up to you. So in this case, I'm going to just select a JPEG. And I am going to go directly to my memory palace. Go into Stills, NTSC, and I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call this Demo. And I'm going to be very careful about what I name it. So dogman.jpg, save. Under JPEG options, the size doesn't really matter, but somewhere between 6 and 10 is usually good. And that's it. So now we need to create a corresponding thumbnail file. We'll go up to Image menu, Image Size. I'm going to take this lock off so that we can enter the precise dimensions for the thumbnails, which need to be 128 by 96. So I'll hit OK. Go up to the File menu, and then I'll save this as Again, I'll go to NTSC. I'll go into my demo folder. And here I'm going to make a new folder. And I'm going to call this Thumb. Now, thumb needs to be spelled exactly correctly, just like this. And then in here, I'm going to again go to JPEG. And I'm going to name this. And I want to make sure that this has the exact same name as the full-size file. So dogman.jpg. Okay, so to recap, you can see on our memory palace in the stills folder in NTSC, we have our demo folder, and here you see our full-sized dogman.jpg image, which is 720 by 480 pixels. And then in our thumb folder, we have the same named file, dogman.jpg, and this thumbnail is 128 by 96 pixels. Typically, I would recommend not saving your files directly onto the memory palace, but rather making sure you have a backup on your own hard drive. Let's quickly go through the process one more time. So you first go to File, New. You're going to create a new document. You're going to set the width to 720 pixels and 480 if you're working in NTSC. 576 if you're working in PAL. Hit Create. If you want to use a pre-existing image, open it in a new window. Copy the image and paste it into your new document. Then you can resize it to fit. I recommend always making sure that your image goes all the way to the edges. Then you'll save the image using the Save As command as either a JPEG or a PNG file. And again, be very careful about how you name these files because you will need to replicate it in the thumbnail. So I'll save the full size. And I'll go up to Image, Image Size. Set this to our thumbnail size, which is 128 by 96. Hit OK. And then we'll save as again into our thumb folder, being sure to use the exact same name that we used for the full size. Again, I'll type in UFO, make it a JPEG, and hit save. So now let's look at something a little bit more complicated. The Memory Palace can also load images with alpha channels. An alpha channel is used to carry transparency information from one program to another. So effectively what this does is it gives you a fourth channel that you use as a mask. This will be easier to explain when we see it in action. So again, I'm going to create a new document. I'm going to create it 720 pixels wide by 480 pixels high, as we always will for Memory Palace. Then I'm going to open up kind of a colorful image. There's some paint splashes. So we have this nice paint splash image. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it into my blank document. It's at the correct size for the Memory Palace. I'll resize this paint image a little bit more detail. And then I'm going to use the hue and saturation controls in Photoshop to kind of bump this up a little bit so you get a little more variety in color going on. Okay. So now what I want to do is apply an alpha channel to this image. This will allow me to cut out different transparent regions in this image. And the way you do that is by creating a layer mask. Again, other image processing programs might have a different way of doing this, but the philosophy is the same. So in Photoshop, I'll go to Layer, Layer Mask, Reveal All. If I look down here on my layers, I can see there's just a plain white mask now associated with this layer of the image. Now the way this works is wherever you draw black into this layer mask, the image will become transparent. And wherever you draw white, so I'm just going to switch my brush controls around here, the image will appear. So you could do a bunch of pretty simple things in here. You can also paste an image directly into that layer mask, or you can draw different shapes like gradients. So I'm going to use my gradient tool here. I have a custom kind of staggered gradient that I made, and I set it to radial mode. I'm going to go in the middle and just draw kind of a basic black and white spiral. And I'm just going to center it a little bit. The important thing I'm noticing here is I want to make sure that the edges of this alpha channel are clearly contained within the image. So if you look over here on the layer panel, you can kind of see what's going on. I've got this black and white alpha image that I'm using as a mask. And then I've got this color information that I'm storing separately in the RGB channels. I'm going to delete my background layer, because if that's still there, this is not going to export properly. So now you see in Photoshop, there's this checkered background. This implies that there's transparency information, and that transparency information will be exported as an alpha channel. So once I have my layer mask the way I want it, and my color information the way I want it, I'm just going to go to File, Save As. And in this case, I'm going to make sure that I definitely save as a PNG. PNG files are the easiest way to ensure that alpha channels are exported properly for the Memory Palace. I'm going to name this Alpha Circles. And I'm going to save it in my Stills NTSC demo folder. Medium file size is going to be fine. Hit OK. Then I'll change my image size to create the thumbnail. So under image size, under width, I'll go to 128. And height, I'll go to 96. Hit OK. And then we'll do another save as. Go into our thumb folder. And here, I'll just make sure to name it the exact same thing, alphacircles.png. And hit save. Now that we have all of our new images stored on the internal drive of the memory palace, navigate to our Still Selection folder, and we should see our new folder, which is called Demo. So here you can see our Dogman still. Here you can see our UFO still. Let's look at the one we recorded with the alpha channel. This is going to require a little bit of a different workflow in the memory palace. So you'll notice in the thumbnail you don't see any of the alpha information. I'm going to go over to our main menu. I'm going to make sure our path is set to warp. And where it says key, I need to set this to alpha in order for our alpha channel to start working. So now you can see as I start to adjust my width control and my center control that circular gradient we saved starts to appear. Pull the contrast down so you can see it a little bit better. So this is really neat because you can paint some color information and then save it with different masks already embedded. If we set this back to Luma, you'll see what happens without the alpha channel. So now we just have that painting, and we can kind of swing through the different parts of the paint so we can get these little windows. So another nice benefit of saving images with alpha channels is that you can actually generate two separate keys from the same image. I'll set that back to alpha. This allows you to generate really specific shapes and still embed some interesting color texture underneath. From here we can take an LFO, put it into the center control, and start to modulate the alpha channel. It's important that you have some grayscale information in your alpha channel or else this won't work. So you can have fun in Photoshop painting all kinds of stuff into your layer masks and using different textures underneath. This gives you just another extra dimension to play with your memory palace. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you now feel prepared to load stills onto your memory palace and work with creating some of your own. If you have any questions about working with alpha channels or loading stills onto the memory palace, please leave them in the comments of this video.